All right. Just let everybody know we're going to record our session so that we can share out for folks who weren't able to make it. Thanks everybody for joining this month's Cloud Office Hours on Secure Score. My name is Jerry Martin, Cloud Strategist, Engagement Manager at Plan. I wanted to, again, thank you everybody for joining this afternoon to review the agenda. We're going to speak over the Secure Score overview. Take about 30 minutes. It's a tight agenda, and we'll also allow for a lot of open mic questions as we get through the discussion today. Just a quick reminder, you already own it team is Bob Ballard, Principal Strategist, Cloud Strategist for Planet Technologies, myself, Jerry Martin, Mary Tucker, who's all things administrative and coordination of everything that we do here with the You Already Own It team, and our Vice President and sponsor, Steve Winter at Planet Technologies. So again, we'll also want to make sure that you don't forget your ability to reach out to our You Already Own It experts as a function of You Already Own It benefits. It's just simple as You Already Own It at goplanet.com. Again, it's an ability to reach out to our experts on anything that you might have question-wise related to this topic or any other topic you want to query us about, and we'll be able to reach back out to you via that portal. And if it's something that really desires or requires a conversation, we'll typically just respond back with an invitation to a Skype meeting, and we'll chat about it. So again, today's conversation is around Secure Score, and Bob's going to be doing both the discussion as well as the demonstration today. And Bob, take it over.
Thanks, Jerry. Let me take over as presenter here. So I'm really excited to bring up this topic. This is, so Microsoft brings, lots of features and capabilities to the Office 365 and overall cloud platform over the years, but I can think of few as exciting as this one when it comes to helping our customers really get over some of the challenges they face with securing and their cloud environments, right? So the big challenge is, and I love this slide because it sort of talks about, here are all the places you can go and look and find controls, right? I can set settings in all kinds of various places in admin consoles. Wow, it's walking through my slides here. Hold on one second. I can go to the Office 365 admin center, the security and compliance center. There's places in Azure, particularly for those customers with EMS, right? There's all these places I can go, and it's really hard to sort of get your head wrapped around, okay, what do I have turned on? What are most people doing? What are the options that sit out in front of me? So what if I had all of the security controls in one place and sort of something like a credit score for evaluating where I fit in the paradigm, right? So if you look here, you get a screenshot here of your score is X out of a possible 512, and here is where your score has been over time, and here is where it maps to baseline of the average customer. Right, and so I think these kinds of things are really helpful. So just getting a score that says, hey, you're 58 out of 305 or 612 or whatever it might be, that's great, right? And it's recommendations, but also, what is that in comparison to other customers that are out there as well, right? So as we look at this, getting your score. It's based on the configuration and baseline that we have, so that I can compare it against other things. I think all the animations are playing on their own for some reason. So we can figure out. But not only is it your score, and here here's how you're doing, but here are specific actions in which I can take as an organization to improve my score. The score is updated daily, so Unfortunately, you can't just make the change and then go in immediately and see what it did, but I can see it the next day. So I can make changes, go back and look at it the next day and say, okay, that improved it. There's also some really cool little modeling tools about what things I need to do to make my score go up by 50, and I'll show you all those in the demo. They have specific sort of specific guidance on what you need to do, the things that you need to change, and things that you have already done and how you can even improve those as well, right? So it gives you my great reveal came too quickly. It gives you a great idea of sort of how you look at the risk that you're doing, rather than just reacting to things, which is really sort of the model in which a lot of us take. Hey, I heard about this, I want to turn this on, or I heard a presentation, I went to Bob and Jerry's webcast last month and they talked about something. How can I sort of programmatically look at all the tools that are available to me and enable them and walk through? So, as we look at this, one thing to note before I get into the demo here is, in fact, that it is coming to Azure Government as well. So right now we're going to look at how this applies to Office 365. But no, in the coming 30, 60 days, we're going to be able to apply these to our Azure environments as well with systematic, recommendations about how do I secure those too, which is a great development that Microsoft sort of announced in the last couple of weeks. So let me just go ahead and demonstrate what this looks like. Present my desktop. So here is a demo tenant that I have here that I use all the time that talks about the secure score. So just so you guys know, and Jerry, maybe you can type this in the window, and we'll do it on our follow-up email as well. But you go to securescore.office.com. If you're an administrator and you log on in the credentials prompt, you will get this information. So you land on the summary page. You get a summary of what your score is. The number is out of the number out of is based on the amount of features that you own and have available to you in your tenant. And then how it gives you, hey, if you to get to a targeted score, here are the actions you need to take, and a lot of great Q articles, etc., based on what these top-level recommendations are for you. A nice little breakdown and comparison score. In this particular case of the tenant that I have, I'm scoring 89 when the average score across Office 365 tenants is 56. So while I'm doing better than average, I still have the capability to go a long way. And it walks through what some of these actions in our queue will be. So if I go to the score analyzer, I get one level deeper. So I can look at what my score has been over time. So I can look at the last 3 months. I can look at the last 30 days. I can look at the last 7 days. Right? So looking at it over 3 months, and I can look at that 3-month period for different periods as well. So if I started earlier, it may change my score depending on if I want to go back and look historically. So my score for today is 89 out of 364. And it goes through and lists the actions in which I've gotten points for to acquire my score. So in the particular case of some of these, for enable MFA for all my global admins, it gives me a score out of 10 out of 50, which means I have 5 global admins, and I've done it for 1 in my tenant. I purposely have some of this stuff done in this way. But as I go through each of these, I can expand. It gives you a little more details. It talks about the threats that it helps you do. And it kind of gives you, sort of the category it lives, what the user impact might be, and what the implementation cost is, and what the action, what the score has given me. So the first tab I'm looking at are completed actions. So these are things that I've either partially done or completely done to raise my score. So I look at, so while looking at, for instance, MFA for global admins, it has no very low user impact, right? It's just going to impact my admins. But if I kick it up a notch and say I want to enable multi-factor authentication for all users, which gives me, a good amount of points here in my score, it says the user impact is moderate, right? Because it actually is impacting what the users do. They need to present additional, we create an additional step in their login process, et cetera. So I call that out as, moderate user impact. There's some interesting ones on here that sometimes help us think about security in different ways as well, right? We want to make sure we designate more than one global admin. That way, that actually creates a security risk. If that global admin were to leave, lock out their password, et cetera, we need to have a secondary person to have there. In this case, we have that. But some of the other ones that I found are interesting, and again, these are all just recommendations from Microsoft, and you have to put them through your own filter. But, for example, do not expire passwords, right? So we've been learning our whole lives from a security standpoint that we want to have passwords reset, every 45 days or 60 days or one of those things. It's actually guidance out of Microsoft now that the data says that if I have a strong user password that isn't actually a word and isn't linked back to their name and meets all the complexity and pragmatic things that we need to look at. The fact that we make them change it every 60 days brings them to the point where they actually tend to do a rotation of passwords, and they tend to do some patterning around that. So one of the things I often say, so we look for things like password with a 1 at the end, password at a 2, and reject that. But by the way, the system doesn't know that if I do, password, and then I hit shift and do exclamation point 1, and then I do shift at symbol 2, that's really sort of a pattern, right? But for instance, the tools don't recognize that as a pattern. So in some cases, for instance, we could actually be making passwords worse, right? So I just want to point this out as some of these are interesting and challenge conventional wisdom, and you should always put it through your own filter, but it was just an example of one that I found fascinating to me as someone who's been involved in security for a long time. It really maps back to some of the things that I often said about how complex you require your passwords to be that I've preached for a long time. But right out of this, right out of these sort of recommendations, if I click the update button, and I haven't logged in. So let me go back. This has been sitting for a while. If I scroll down again, go to my score analyzer, and I go to do not expire passwords, and I hit the update button, it actually will talk about what am I asking to do, and if I hit launch now, it will actually take me into the portal right to that setting where I can in fact make those changes, right? Some of these are easier than others to do and require less sort of consultation before you do them, but this took me right to portal.office.com service settings, and I could go right from the secure score setting and make the changes that it's recommending. So if I go back, let me just close this window. I go back and look around. So these are sort of some of the completed actions that I had. If I look down here and I have a list of incomplete actions, here are ones where I, a pretty significant list of recommendations that I can do: disable accounts not used in 30 days, allow anonymous guest links for sharing, etc., that I can go in and actually walk through. Bless you. Bless you again.
I'm very sorry.
No worries. I can go through and actually make these changes. I can learn more about them. Disable accounts after 30 days. I click to learn more. I can launch again, and it'll take me directly to the admin portal where I can make. So I don't want to go through having to. I need to set up MFA for this particular user, so I want to go through. I don't want to go through that, but it literally will take me directly into the admin portal, and actually allow me to make those changes. So I can't think of another way that Microsoft has sort of aggregated across all of these various work streams. As you see, right, some of these are tenant type security settings. Some of these are OneDrive specific security settings. Some of these are Exchange specific, enable client forwarding, enable client rules forwarding block. I mean, they're Exchange specific settings. They're across all of those. They break them down into categories of data or account settings, etc. Goes across all of those and allows me to walk through. And some of these require some significant conversation and thought, but some of these are pretty easy and should be no-brainers. And I can kind of go through and say, am I using these things? The other thing I've found from customers, right, enable advanced threat protection links. You may or may not even know you have these capabilities, right? Oftentimes, talking about mobile device management services, etc. You may not know what you can and can't do here, and it helps sort of educate you on what's available. Now, I'm going to get into this in a second, but Microsoft also recognizes, right, that this is in fact this is a lot to take in, and customers may not be able to understand and make all of these choices on their own. So they do have a program that can help partners like Planet actually help you walk through this besides what you can do on your own. And I'm going to hop back here, stop presenting my desktop, go back to the deck for a second. Go back to my deck and talk about the Secure Score workshop that's available from Microsoft. And I have a typo. It should be to get Secure Score working and not Azure Information Protection. That was last week's call. I missed that on this slide. But it's a 2-day workshop. We basically go through the Secure Score and walk through in both an educational and implementation sort of risk analysis with you around these and develop an action plan. Look, I don't believe any customer is ever going to go through the Secure Score portal and say, I'm going to turn all of these and I'm going to get to my 452 on my Secure Score. You can see what the average tenant is. It's only in the 50s, right? And there are reasons, right? So, being secure is a goal that we all strive for, but we also, there's usability, there's business challenges to enabling some of these things, there's educational knowledge and impact that needs to be discussed and reviewed, right? So let's walk through these, talk about what their impacts are, pick sort of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 strategy, and deliver that. So what does that look like? So this is actually a sample deck that we use when we talk about sort of the Office 365 security assessment agenda. On day 1, we sort of go through and talk about what we're going to do, give an overview on some of the security elements, talk about what your primary goals are as well, right? Review the security questionnaire that we send to you in advance of this and have you guys fill it out. Talk about what it takes for security readiness, and review your score. As we go out for the end of the day, go over your Secure Score. Then on day 2, we talk about what those recommendations are. We sort of hone in on what you're ready to do. Talk about some other things around shadow IT, etc. Take your go over the readiness and what it takes to implement these things, deliver a roadmap with you, and sort of close out and say, this is what it takes to move forward, right? The good news is, and said so on the slide before, many times this is a funded activity by Microsoft, so engage with your either Microsoft team, your Planet rep, etc., to get this to get this workshop funded by Microsoft. Obviously, they have a goal of securing, securing the tenants of their customers, right? So there's a big advantage to that. So I wanted to finish with this all fits into sort of the cloud enterprise services framework that we're working with customers to implement, right? So, what we talk about, and I did a session in our Office 365 Summit, and I've been talking with customers a lot about this process, and this is a piece that fits into this, and that's, hey, first step, we document and look at your current process, right? We look at all the compliance controls and goals that you have, establish those security requirements, document what needs to be set in the settings, and this is where Secure Score sort of fits in. Let's walk through that, fit where those map, talk about what we are. Ultimately, create your version of the service description so that you can share with your business departments, etc. Establish clear governance on what it takes to adjust those. Assign ownership of those policies so that as things evolve and change, which we know always happens with Microsoft, get clear guidance. Then the service itself has updates, right? And then we do the whole thing over again. And kind of this is part of sort of a solution framework that we're delivering to customers. And the Secure Score and security workshop is just a piece of what we talk about with customers around this topic all the time. So, Jerry, did you want to take over and sort of finish up?
Sure.
I'll advance the slides for you so you don't need to take over the presentation.
Thanks. So the other thing we wanted to mention, one, thanks, Bob, for that. And I think the information that we provided today, as well as a number of other objectives that we have laid out in that overall roadmap that you just talked through, that whole life cycle, is a lot of those sessions and that information we presented in the latest of this year's summit for the Office 365 Summit for Government. If you've had an opportunity or haven't had an opportunity, reach out to the YouTube site that's listed here on this slide. Every one of those sessions are also recorded for your ability to go out and review. You'll see a lot of the content. The one that Bob just talked about is there as well. We'd encourage you to go out and listen and review those videos as well. They're subject-based, so you can skip through the ones that are most salient and important to you as well. And I think that's all we had today. And we'd like to open up as a forum for questions and try to be as responsive as we can to everybody in time we have left. Do we have any questions from anybody on the line?
Is everybody quiet today? Normally we get a couple of good questions from the crowd. So Jerry, can you talk through? Have you walked through this with a customer before and talk a little bit about what the experience, or specifically walking through some of the some of these compliance and security settings with your customer and what that engagement looks like?
Absolutely. So the idea behind the Secure Score workshop really does open up conversational avenues in a lot of areas that you see most of our clients struggle with or have conversations around, that with respect to every aspect of their security, governance, and compliance approach to consuming any of the cloud services within the Microsoft stack. So as we go through the conversation, I think you mentioned in your demo there, it tends to have spearhead a lot of conversations around other types of security activities that folks are not maybe as familiar with, such as on the EMS stack. The multi-factor authentication side of the house is a perfect example of one of those that comes up on a regular basis. The other areas around compliance and governance, and from a data perspective, and how you've got the right administrative rights across those areas. Those tend to be the ones that come up a lot, and they tend to be the gaps that folks are not aware of that this helps identify. The eye-opening gaps tend to be the big things that come out of those kinds of conversations. Anybody come up with any questions? Anybody have anything?
So we actually have a question that came through a side channel here.
Okay.
Is so what if I'm a SCIO, right? What does this not cover, right? And I think that's a great question, right? So this is clearly geared specifically to Office 365 today and your Azure environment. Planet and other partners as well, of course, has offerings that look more broadly at your security profile, right? And can also include so a perfect example is one of the things that are being targeted in the release of the first update to Secure Score for Azure Government is that they're going to include hybrid environments as well and look at some of your on-premises infrastructure. Today, none of that's included, right? Things around network and perimeter security are not included. So it's obviously, geared and focused on the cloud workload in Microsoft. But, again, the Secure Score offering looks to be targeting expanding that to a certain degree. How much information that will include and how thorough it is no one's seen that yet. But it's just a piece of an overall comprehensive security assessment review that that I think is very well targeted. In a lot of customers, right, they have some process in place for some of these elements. They've obviously had on-premise infrastructure and network perimeter security for a long time. But clearly that needs to be addressed as well, right? And so so obviously whether that's through whatever process you already have or you think you need to update that and include that, we do have more comprehensive offerings that look at those types of things and include those other additional key elements as well. And then there's one other thing I wanted to bring up too, for sure, before I forgot. And normally I don't do like the sales pitch to pitch the next one of these sessions, but it's particularly relevant and sort of on topic today. So we've been working with Microsoft to talk about some really interesting tools that they've been developing and crafting to implement some specific high value security threats that are out there. So there's been some interesting developments in the last few months around very targeting phishing, right? So the term that they're using is trusted user targeted phishing. And I'm going to paint a scenario to you, and this is a real. I'm going to keep the specific customer out of this, but this is a real thing that's happened. And by the way, it's more than one customer. I've spoken to the Microsoft team that's dealt with a number of customers that had this specifically happen. So they got targeted by a more traditional phishing attack, socially engineered. They were able to sort of compromise a particular user, right? That user. So in the past, right, one of the things we did with compromising users was, we compromised the user. We used their email account to send out lots of spam messages, and we collected our 2 cents per read message, and I was able to make money that way. Well, they've sort of found out there's a better way to make money. And that way is to compromise that user, sit in their mailbox, snoop around at what they do, and have some sort of targeted programmatic things that I can sniff for, like payroll or pay stubs. And what we had a customer that actually grabbed and stole the credentials for a trusted user, logged on to the payroll system, changed the bank account to be their bank account, and started having employees' paychecks go into the phishing hacker's bank account. They're smart enough to know, however, that when I do this, when I change my payroll records, I usually get a notification from payroll that says you change it. They actually have rules that they implement in the compromised accounts Outlook that says delete all messages that include the word pay stub or payroll or HR. So they actually were unaware that their payroll was changed. Sometimes it could be multiple weeks before anybody realized what's happening. And so there were actually multiple customers that actually had this occur. So we're going to talk about some targeting technologies to very programmatically look at these kinds of compromises that can be implemented in your environment. Where it's codenamed Fish Hunter with the PHISH, Fish Hunter, and that will be the topic that we talk about next month because it's particularly powerful and scary attack that's growing more and more prominent in your environment. And I just wanted to mention today because it ties into this stuff specifically. The real challenge in actually accounting for this stuff in any current technology is that once the compromise is made, these changes, et cetera, are occurring from a trusted user source, right? So I'm logging on as Bob Ballard at GoPlanet.com and making these changes and making updates to my Outlook, et cetera. So behaviors and how we track them and et cetera, these are really difficult socially engineered attacks to track programmatically. So we'll talk more about that in the next episode of our You Already Own It call, but I just wanted to give a little hint as to what's coming down the road as my teaser.
So it goes to the conversation of what can you do to enhance your secure score that's just not in what we consider to be the typical work streams that we manage with. That social engineering is a pretty serious scenario that folks are dealing with. We can go so far with some of this technology, but some of the newer stuff that we're dealing with right now really has to have some added content to be able to manage it. So looking forward to that, Bob, and leave the table open a little bit longer for some more questions if anybody has any.
Any other questions out there?
Shelly's typing. When's the next call?
So I just updated it. Everybody should have seen. Typically we're the fourth Thursday, but obviously that's a Christmas week issue. So I updated the call to be on the 21st of December.
All right. Well, if without any other questions. Shelly's typing. There we go. You're welcome, Shelly. So without any other questions, if we can call that a wrap, we'd like to adjourn. And thanks everybody for joining and look forward to seeing you on the next call.
Thanks, everyone.